Gander, but I currently live in Tennessee. I'm practicing in stem cell transplant at a big academic center. Previous to PA school, I graduated from Michigan State, so go green for any of those Spartans out there. I went to go get my master's in public health first, focusing on health education. And then I went to PA school, always knowing I wanted to be a PA right after that. So as Michelle mentioned, I'm currently in the doctorate program, so Doctorate of Medical Sciences. I'm attending the Rocky Mountain program. That's all online. So it's been really fun to kind of explore that avenue and different options as a PA. I've been a part of, I feel like I've been doing pre-PA mentoring for a long time previous to this, but obviously working with this team, I'm just so lucky and so blessed. And I really have enjoyed the last, few months really helping you guys through this journey. So that's a little bit about me. Joel, you want to go?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Joel, and I'm also a new PA coming up on almost 2 years now. And I practice in the field of ophthalmology, both in the clinic and in surgery. Prior to PA school, I worked in ophthalmology as well, so it was always a draw for me there. Outside of work, a passion of mine is honestly helping students, and I did it with friends. I helped them with their essays and interviews, and then when Michelle and I were talking, it was like, oh, this makes sense, just to kind of broaden the horizon to be able to help more people. And I think about this all the time. I work 4 days a week and I could work 5 days a week, but I like having an extra day to help you all. It feels a passion outside of the clinic, outside of the OR, that really is fantastic. So thank you all for just opening your lives to us. And it's nothing, honestly, more rewarding than when we get that message to say, I got in. It's really awesome that you invite us on your journey with you. So we're happy to help, and we're excited to get started.
Thank you, guys. Okay, so the majority of the questions that we've gotten were, a lot of them included GPA, healthcare experience, and then a lot of miscellaneous. So we'll start with GPA. And so one of the questions we get is, is one bad grade going to affect your chances of getting accepted? For example, if you got a D in organic chemistry. In my personal opinion, I think no, if you retake that class and do well in it. I think you start running into problems if you have multiple classes where you had to retake them, or you have multiple C's and D's in your prerequisites. So I know personally for me, I had C in chemistry. It did not affect my chances of being accepted, but most schools do have a requirement of B- or C or above. I mean, what do you guys think, Joel?
Yeah, so I would agree with Michelle. And the specific question, when they said they have a D, definitely retake the D. You don't want anything lower than a C, but I prefer all applicants, if you're going to have a C, just have one. And that's also from personal experience. I had a C in my first semester of organic chemistry and I still got in, but everything else was A's. So if you have more than one C, though, retake those classes. I really don't want you to have more than one.
Yeah, and on that note, Emily, do you feel having multiple repeat classes on a transcript affect a person getting into a PA program?
I mean, I think it can, to a certain degree, I think maybe affect your chances of getting into a PA program. However, I would rather see you retake the course than not retake the course. Mm-hmm. I also think there's a way, and some of this comes into your personal statement and how you present it, in the fact that even if, it was kind of borderline and you maybe could sneak by with a 3-point, you recognized that it wasn't to your full academic potential. And so you initiated that, you felt like you needed more mastery of that material. And so you retook it, even though you may not have needed to. I think it's just kind of your mindset and how you go about that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. So, I mean, I think there's multiple different kinds of applicants that have a lower GPA. And if you're somebody that went to college years ago, let's say 7 to 10 years ago, your freshman year, and you have multiple low grades, but now, 7 to 10 years later, you have retaken all those classes more recently to be able to, go to PA school and you slay them, then I don't think that hurts your chances. I mean, that was so long ago. Maybe you were young, maybe you were going through something, whatever it is. But if you're somebody that, has, just recently graduated college and you have, sort of a lot of low grades sort of in the beginning, and then again, you take them and do better in the end, they like to see that upward trajectory. So if you struggled early, then maybe you make up for that over the next couple of years, in college. It's where you start running into problems is if you continually have difficulty, particularly in the prerequisites, particularly having to retake them multiple times. I think that's when you run into, more of a problem.
Yeah, definitely. And that's so, to have between, like, there's multiple different types of students. So it kind of depends, where you are, recent grad versus been out in the field for a little bit longer.
Yeah. So like, okay, one of the questions was, do you have recommendations if you're a senior with a 2.7 GPA? Do you do a post-bac? Do you do others? Again, I think that really depends on what are the grades that are bringing down that GPA. And if those are science grades, then yes, you may want to look into doing, a post-bac program or even a master's program, and make sure that you have, done well in the prerequisites, whether you had to retake them or not. It's hard to recommend people just to take classes sort of a la carte, versus doing a post-bac program. Again, it really depends on the applicant. I mean, Joel, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, for someone, if they come to me and their GPA is under 3.0, just in full honesty, it's really hard to apply to schools because most schools want a minimum cumulative GPA of 3.0. So if you are sitting at under that, then you kind of don't really have a choice but to retake classes to get that GPA up. And as Michelle said, you want your science and the prereqs to be solid grades, but your cumulative GPA is also one of the requirements. And so your science GPA is different than your cumulative GPA. And it's really hard to get the GPA up. It just seems so much easier to bring it down. So if you're under 3.0 as a whole cumulative GPA, you have to get that above 3.0 for most PA schools. And I would definitely encourage that.
Yeah, I agree with that. It is hard, and it's amazing how 1D can tank your GPA, but like, you could get a multiple A's and, B cents, but, there are some programs that have a 2.75 minimum, but if you look at the people that get accepted there, those are going to be 3.0, and sort of above. So I'm with you about that. And there was a question about the differences between the GPAs that are calculated through CASPA. So there's the cumulative GPA, which literally includes every single class you've ever taken. So like, if you took classes at a community college and you have your undergraduate, it's everything all together. And then, CASPA separates out multiple GPAs, so you're under sort of like your undergraduate GPA, your science GPA, your, non-science GPA, all of these things. And, what goes into the calculations are, it's a point system. So if you get an A which is a 4.0 in a 4-credit class, 4 times 4 is 16, you get 16 points. And then at the end of all that, they take all the points and, it's divided by the number of credits you've taken, and that's sort of your overall. And they kind of break it down a lot of different ways is what I understand. So, when people ask, do post-bac science classes get factored into your, GPA, just like undergraduate classes do? Yes. It's kind of all together. But if you're looking to boost your GPA, after your undergrad, they do calculate also like a post-bac GPA, and they may see that, oh, well, in her, undergraduate, she's at a 3.0, but in her post-bac, she had a 3.7. So that may improve your chances, particularly in schools that look at the last 60 or last 40 credits more heavily. What have you seen, Emily?
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I think that they definitely take into account a post-bac. I just encourage people, if you are doing, I more so am looking at mindset. So like what happened in undergrad, or how are things going to change for when you go to a post-bac or master's program? Because really you have to, in my mind, get definitely above a 3.5 and even closer to a 4 point for a lower GPA for a school to really kind of consider your application. And so I think I just encourage people to really, focus on like, maybe if you're working a full-time job and doing post-bac classes, that might not be, a good decision, because obviously maybe you were working full-time in undergrad and you couldn't, handle that and kind of your course load. But yeah, I definitely see any, post-bac classes helping students for sure.
Yeah, I'm sort of, I think that, hold on a second. I think that the streaming people only see me. I don't know that they can see you, but I can't tell the way this is. So I will have to figure that out at another point, and I'll repost this later, but there's 15 people here watching too, but they can hear, so that's good. All right, and so we talked a lot about GPA, and can you make up for a lower GPA with more patient care hours? What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, so when I meet with people, I like to see kind of like, where are your strengths and weaknesses? So it can be pretty common where someone has a ton of hours and they're lower on the GPA. So GPA is kind of like their weak point. I would say generally, like, as long as you have the minimum requirements on the GPA, then you will want to kind of counter that weakness and excel in another area. And so extra patient care hours can definitely be helpful and offset it. But again, if you're under that minimum requirement, you're probably not going to get looked at. So I do think, though, having extra hours can help offset that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I totally agree with that. And I think it's dependent on like what your patient care is in,
Yes.
and kind of what your experience has been. Like if you're an EMT for 15 years or 10 years or 5 years or 3 years, that's a really great experience to have. I will say, in my experience and just friends who are PAs now, people who have kind of a greater GPA and a little bit maybe less hours, I find get in or have a little bit more availability in terms of making a choice for what school they want to go to, versus a student who has like a lot of hours and a really, really low GPA. That's just my experience, though, and like my friends. But I definitely do think, like you were saying, Joel, with a lower GPA, having some type of extra kind of excelling in those strength areas with patient care and different experiences definitely help your application.
Yeah, I agree. I know a lot of people that have over 5,000 hours, of patient care experience, closer to, 7,000 or 8,000. And I do think that if they have a lower GPA, that does help. It's not just about the GPA. It also matters, with how, what kind of experience you have, what can you add to this class? Are you going to be able to make it through the academic program? There's a lot of different things that go into it. It's not just one thing. But, hopefully, if you do have a lower GPA, but you've retaken the classes and you've done well in them and you have all these hours, they're going to take that more into account. And somebody asked, what do you consider, a lot of patient care hours? I consider a lot of patient care hours over the minimum, over 2,000, because the average is about 2,000 that get in. Agreed. So I would consider that. And
I think to kind of talk to finish this point, basically what we're communicating, and this is, I think, one of the biggest mistakes I see, is people apply too early. They're a minimal applicant. So if you have a lower GPA, they have like the minimum hours where they can apply, and so they meet the requirements, but then you're not offsetting yourself. And if you're having difficulty pulling up your GPA, because it's a lot harder to pull up a low GPA than it is to get more hours, you might want to consider taking another year and get more hours, so that way you're not the minimal applicant in all the lanes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Hopefully so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, so I don't want to quit it. Darn it. I think they can only see me. And so if I quit the live stream, I'm going to have to restart it. Oh, bummer. Okay.
At least.
What's that?
Can they hear all of us?
I think they can hear all of you. I'm recording it here anyway, so I can repost it there, but I just want to, I just wanted to see if I could make that happen for them. But anyway, okay. So healthcare hours, since we're talking about it, what is the easiest way to get patient care experience that's not scribing?
I love this question.
Oh, that's funny. I would say I think I don't know, like easiest, but I mean, I think one of a great way to get patient care hours is if you can find like a medical assistant or like a certified nursing assistant type job that doesn't necessarily require a certification. I've had a lot of questions on if you have to take, like a year. Some of these programs are like a year to get certified in medical assistant. For certain institutions, yes, you have to have a certification to do that role. However, in a lot of private practices and other healthcare settings, you don't. They want to train you kind of on the job. And I think vocalizing, that you're a PA student looking to gain hours, you're really invested in learning the medicine, I found is really successful. Recently, it's been obviously very difficult for people to get patient care hours. So I've honestly told people to reach out to all of your family, friends, all of your contacts, your pre-PA clubs at your schools, as well as just honestly cold calling offices and seeing if they have any need or are willing to train someone in that type of role. Because, I worked as a medical assistant for 2 years and I got some really great patient care experience that has actually helped me now as a PA. So what do you think, Joel?
Yeah, I agree. If some of you are sitting there having the thought I remember having of, I went to 4-year college, I don't want to spend more money doing another certification class just to then work in a field that you're going to leave. It's kind of like Michelle's post about like, tell me you're a PA without saying you're a PA. And she went into that saying about I work in this job that you don't really want to do. So I've been there, and my approach was like what Emily did. I went to private practices and I literally worked as a tech where I was just trained on the job and I got paid to learn instead of paying to go get a training. So there are options out there. I found success in like a lot of dermatology practices do that, or I was in ophthalmology. A lot of eye clinics function that way. We train people on the job. So there are some maybe areas you don't think about that are really work that way. And for me, I find pretty like primary care, dermatology, and ophthalmology do that pretty well. And orthopedics do that too.
Yeah, I feel like they do as well. I think I finally got this working, you guys, that they can see, not just me. They could basically see my whole screen now, but whatever. It's better than nothing. So, okay. So I agree with you guys wholeheartedly. I feel like, I went back and did a 6-week course at the Red Cross to become a CNA. It wasn't that complicated. It wasn't that expensive. But at the same time, it was like going in reverse. Like I had a college degree and I was working for like, at that time, it was like what, $9 an hour, and I was doing it on off times, on the weekends, at night, so, I mean, there's a lot to be said, for this time in your life that you're going to have to make, certain sacrifices, and it's going to feel like everybody is moving forward and you're not. But at the end of the day, it's for an end root cause. I agree. I think that some offices are willing to train for medical assistant positions. But other than that, I think, CNA is not that long. Some of the medical assistant training is very long. Phlebotomy is not that long. I would say that that's not the highest quality of healthcare, patient care experience you can get, but it counts. A lot of people ask me about pharmacy tech. That's really on the bubble. A lot of schools do not count that anymore. And so I think that, there's a lot of different things that kind of go into this. But other things you could consider would be like a physical therapy aide or, something like that doesn't require necessarily like a certification course of some kind. And so everything is like going crazy. My dog is barking. I mean, this is it. This is live, y'all. So, I think that that's part of it. And, somebody's asking, which is more valuable, more healthcare experience or more shadowing? And when we're talking about healthcare, so I think the biggest thing we need to talk about right now is the difference between healthcare and patient care. So who wants to take that one?
Yeah, I can do that. So within CASPA, within your PA application, you're going to be able to list your patient care experience and your healthcare experience. Patient care experience is going to be anything where you're hands-on with patients. Healthcare experience would maybe be more like a pharmacy tech, where you work in the healthcare field, but you're not actively with patients and you're behind the counter. So you're going to have the option to list both, and both are good, but schools will grade higher the patient care experience where you're doing the hands-on. They look at quality of type of hours. So for example, like if you're a CNA and you're a CNA in an assisted living versus a CNA maybe in like a hospital setting, the hospital setting might give you more exposure and a little more applicable type of training to PA school, that they might weigh that more heavy than like assisted living. But those are both considered patient care because you're hands-on, whereas healthcare is experience in the field, but you're like a back office assistant and you're not actively with patients.
Exactly. So, you guys, I finally got this right. I'm so proud of myself. Those 11 people are still here. Yay. But yeah, I agree. You got to be somehow involved, in patient care, hands-on with patients. Some people will say, does a mental health counselor count? I think so. Does a caregiver count? No.
Mm-hmm.
I think no. So,
I agree.
And so I think that there's, multiple different ways to do this. But I have somebody that's asking here now, what are your thoughts about applying with 700 PCE, but 4,000 HCE?
Okay, so basically what that question's saying is they have a lot of healthcare experience,
Yeah.
but not patient care experience.
Mm-hmm.
So someone like maybe they're a pharmacy tech for 4,000 hours, but they have 700. Great question. I think what I would do if I was you is look at the schools you're applying to and see if they have a minimum requirement of how many healthcare experience hours, and base that minimum requirement off of the PCE hours. Mm-hmm. So if they want 500 patient care hours and you have 700, all right, you can go ahead and apply. And then that 4,000 hours is pretty remarkable. It's not that it's a negative thing, it looks great on your application, but don't base the minimum requirement of hours off of your healthcare, base it off of the patient care experience ones. Exactly. So for you, whoever's asking this question would be school selection.
Yeah, I agree with that. I have some people that worked in like the business side of like healthcare. I mean, that's amazing experience. So, just apply to schools that you fit the minimum for, in that regard, like you're saying. But, another question that's popping up is, is how far back can this experience go? So like some people are saying, how far back? I'm in college. Like if you're in college, I feel like you can use high school experience if it's relevant to like you got patient care hours or your volunteer EMT or like something. But if you're like 4 years out of college, you should not be pulling high school.
Yeah, I completely agree. I had like a pretty significant high school like volunteer experience where I did like mission work in Africa, and I'd been multiple times. And it's a huge reason, like what like made me, or one of the reasons why I became a PA. And so I included that in my CASPA because it was so significant to like my experience and kind of my patient care experience. I also wanted to say too, it's important to look at the schools and see if they're looking at paid hours or volunteer hours or don't care. So my program, when I applied, didn't care if it was paid or volunteer. They just wanted hours. And so for people who may have like more healthcare experience hours and not patient care, I'd be interested to see, can you use, or do you have other volunteer experiences in healthcare that maybe for some schools, if they're not requiring paid hours, you could use towards those hours. So I just wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, because there was another question about whether the hours had to be paid or unpaid. So I'm glad that you answered that. I think it does depend on the school, and, definitely look at what they consider for patient care, whether they require it to be paid or not. And then the other thing that I keep slipping my mind this question, but I just had it and it's gone, and it's not, I don't think it's written on here. It had to do with, volunteer or paid hour. Oh, here it is. If you have to have the minimum when you apply, or if you could be working towards them. So a lot of people will tell me, I'm taking a gap year, but I'm applying this year. But I'm like, but if you have no patient care hours and that school requires 500, you have to have 500 before you apply. You can't, continue. Yes, you will continue to gain experience the whole time that you're there, but, in the application process. But if a school has a minimum, that means you need the minimum to apply. There are a couple of schools that will say you need to complete this many hours before matriculation. And if they say that, fantastic. But a lot of people get confused. They're like, well, I'm going to have those hours by the time I start, but you need those hours to apply. And so I think that's a lot that happens to be where people get a little bit confused about, when can I apply?
Right.
And so I think that's a question I get quite often. And also it's like, well, I have 500, but I'm going to have, 1,000 or 2,000 by the time I start. Great. Go back and add an experience and tell the school. But once you submit that application, you can't change that. Okay. So you can only add to it. But Emily, you had not as many patient care hours, and neither did I. I mean, but at the same time, we had other experiences and things. So yeah,
I had a very minimal. I think I had maybe 1,000, maybe. It was very close. And so, but I had a lot of really other good experience, and my patient care was very diverse. And I was fortunate and worked really hard to have a really high GPA. So those things, that's why I'm saying, sometimes it's a little bit of a give and take, I didn't have as many hours, but my GPA was really high, and I had some other cool experiences. So,
yeah.
And for those of you, if you are sitting at kind of this moment where you're like, I'm low in hours, I meet the minimum requirement, and I could submit, what I encourage people in that situation is then maybe focus on schools that do non-rolling admission. So schools on the application, on their website, they'll list they're either rolling admission or non-rolling. Rolling means they will start inviting people for interviews as applications come in. If you're someone where you're like, I have the 500 hours to submit, but I'd like to have more at the time of submission, because as Michelle is saying, once you submit it, that's what they get, then maybe focus on schools that are non-rolling. In other words, their application's not due till, say, November of the application cycle, and they don't look at interview invites until after that. Well, that gives you a couple more months to get more hours at the time of submission. So there is some strategies and ways to work around it.
Yeah, completely agree. That's a great point. And let's kind of, as we sort of talk about this, let's move on to shadowing, because, this is a huge question during the pandemic, has been a huge problem. For a lot of applicants, how do I can't shadow. I don't know what to do. Everything's shut down. How do I get a LOR, like a letter of rec from a PA when I can't shadow? And I think we've said, and I've said multiple times on my social media that, if you can't get an in-person shadowing, virtual shadowing is the best you can do. And we don't know how schools are going to take that, and if schools will accept it or not. Some will, some won't. It does not replace in-person shadowing. So if you have the opportunity to shadow somebody in person, great, but you have to be persistent, and you have to be patient right now. So what have you guys been telling people about shadowing opportunities during this time?
I have I don't know, I've noticed at least the last few weeks with some people I've had counseling sessions with, that a lot of people either will be working in healthcare already at an urgent care. And so I ask, oh, do you work with PAs every day? And most of them say yes. And I said, oh, so have you ever shadowed one of them? No. And I'm like, that's your key. Go and ask them, because honestly, right now, that is the best way. Even if you work at a larger institution and you're, a medical assistant or CNA or something along those lines, I would like to say, most PAs are pretty friendly, pretty nice people. And so, I think it's okay. You have to kind of advocate for yourself and say, I'm applying to PA school. It's really difficult right now to find shadowing. Would you mind if, we can find a date in my off day to kind of shadow you? I think if you're already working, going through your institution or going through whatever office you're already plugged in with is kind of the best thing to do right now. And then honestly, just doing some of the virtual shadowing, like Michelle said, doesn't replace it, but is some of the best, that we can do right now for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it shows effort. It shows you tried.
Yeah,
If I'm
it
sitting
shows
at the
effort.
application that has no shadowing and there's one that has virtual, well, then that would be a strength. At the end of the day, there's going to be a lot of applicants. PA schools get a ton of people, and there probably going to be a lot of people who don't have any because of COVID, but there's going to be plenty, honestly, that still do. And I'm a huge advocate of regarding the letters of rec. Like if you don't have a letter of rec from a PA, you need one from a PA, just like you need to have one from a PA. Schools might say it's optional. It's not. Like, for example, a school that I used to do interviews with, on the website, it said it was optional. In theory, it wasn't. If we had an application that didn't have a letter rec from a PA, we honestly didn't look at it. So you need to have one from a PA for a LOR, and a shadowing is a great way to do that. If you can't get it shadowing, then try to do it through work, like Emily said, or something like that.
Yeah,
But
somebody just asked, like, if we shadow a PA while they're doing telehealth, hell yeah, that counts.
yes,
Yeah,
100%.
like totally. And
100%.
Emily's point, I work at a mid-sized, university hospital, and I work at a cancer center. I have not been able to take anybody, from the outside. However, I got an email from a girl who works at the institution, and so she already has clearance to work. She already has everything. And she's like, can I come shadow you? And I said, yes, because you work here, So if you work there, that's your in. If you have a family member, if your primary care person is a PA, I mean, I'm talking pull out all the strings. Okay. Like if your best friend's sister's brother is a PA, you better get that person, like use all the connections that you can. And a lot of people will say no right now, but you may get an occasional yes. And, and Joel is so right. While there are going to be a lot of people without shadowing, there's going to be a hell of a lot that already do. And so there's nothing you can do about that. You're in a different position than somebody else. But I think you have to pull out all those stops. And, how to approach a PA and ask them to shadow. This girl just said she found a PA to shadow on LinkedIn. Nice job. That's a good one. You got to get creative. How you approach a PA and ask them to shadow, I think you just have to, say in a professional kind way, like, I'm a pre-PA student. I'm so excited to become a PA. I was wondering if you would allow me to shadow you. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything overly eloquent or anything fancy. Just ask. So, and, be natural. The worst they can say is no. And same for volunteer experiences. You got to think outside the box. Many places are doing online volunteer. I've
been encouraging a lot of people. I also work in stem cells. I'm maybe a little biased, but we have a huge blood shortage right now. And so I have been really encouraging people to reach out to their local, blood bank or blood donation agencies like Red Cross and some of the other ones, because a lot of them are looking for people to host blood drives or to, at least assist in them. And so I've been really encouraging people to do that because it's a great volunteer experience and it's really helping a lot of patients who, really need the blood product. So
that's a great opportunity for leadership. Like organize a blood drive.
Right.
I mean, that's insane. Like great, leadership experience, and you get volunteer experience at the same time. Crisis text hotline. If you go to like operationwarm.org used to have a list, or dosomething.org. And so I think those are sort of good online things to do. And a lot of people like American Heart Association, like things like that, they have a lot of stuff online, volunteer wise right now. So you kind of just got to look and think outside the box. The same goes for shadowing. As far as minimum shadowing hours, what would you guys say? I mean, a lot of schools don't have a minimum, so I don't get too caught up on that. I say any hours are good hours at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I think kind of when I was applying to PA school, the kind of rule of thumb was like 40 hours of in-person shadowing was kind of the goal. However, like I said, I'm not sure, with everything going on, what that like minimum, what that new standard will be. But I don't know. I agree with Joel. I think if you don't have a letter of rec from a PA, to me, it's a huge, deficit on your application a little bit. And also, I really like to see for applicants that they've seen like more than one PA, just, you know, to kind of see what diversity is out there. And that's, you know, I think that's very, like that's available sometimes even through these virtual shadowing. I will say, like, even though it's not the same as shadowing in person, Michelle and I have talked about a little bit, like, I feel like in our virtual shadowing, we're able to go over a lot of things sometimes and answer, you know, students' questions kind of right on the spot, which sometimes we don't have all the time when you're shadowing in person. So
yeah,
I think the little pros and cons obviously doesn't replace the in person. But Joel, do you have any other like about the shadowing? Is 40 hours like kind of what you were tell people?
Yeah, I think with Michelle, any hours is good hours.
Yeah.
In full transparency, just I think honesty is the best. When I applied, I had 8 hours of shadowing and I got it. So I didn't have a lot. I honestly, like, if you have 10, put them on there. There are a few schools though that do put on there a minimum requirement of 40. So there are some that do put a minimum. I think the whole point of the shadowing, when a school doesn't specify, the whole point of it is to show that you have seen the role of PA in action and you got your letter of rec either from, if you don't have it from your workplace, then that's how you get it. Right. So for me, like, that's what I see in the shadowing of people. If you're someone who doesn't work with PAs, is you have hours, you spent time with the PA, they got the letter of rec, there you go. That's like your goal. Once that accomplishes, then you can get extra hours if you can, but your main goal of shadowing is trying to get that letter of rec.
Yeah, agree.
I agree. And, you know, in terms of volunteer experience, the answer to does it have to be medical is no. I mean, if you have a church that you volunteer for, great. I mean, you know, we just want to know that you're giving back to your community, that you care about other, you know, people and willing to give your time. And so whatever volunteer experience you can get. Somebody was just asking how they volunteer at COVID sites and in the chat here. And then someone else said, I got a COVID test and I asked. Well, that's a great way to do it. I mean, think about it, you know, so I think that you really have to sort of get creative here and, you know, kind of do some things that may seem unorthodox to you, but at the same time, I mean, you're pretty much looking for opportunity. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Right. I also encourage people to use like their other skills. Like if you're a yoga instructor or you really enjoy card making or crafting or something like that, use those skills to give back to your community, you know, host, you know, a yoga session, like a chair yoga session for a like senior center or something like that, where, you know, you're using something you're already super passionate about to help others. I think that's really, you know, I don't know, it looks good, I think, in an application. It's just a good thing to do in general.
Before we jump into some sort of other random questions, somebody here is asking us how we feel about sort of the 5-year accelerated, you know, entry-level PA programs. I don't have a ton of experience with them, but there are a fair number of them out there that you can go in as a freshman on a PA track. Some of them have a 3 and 3, so some of them is like 6 years. Others are, you know, more of a 5-year model, and some make you kind of interview after a certain, you know, after the first 2 years. And if you don't meet their standards, then you can't kind of go through. But I mean, I think you're going to get the same good training regardless. It's just that your undergrad is probably going to be accelerated. Don't you all feel, do you feel that way?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Emily.
I don't have a ton of experience with it as well. I don't have a ton of like colleagues who have done it. Like personally, I really wanted, even though I wanted to be a PA, my undergrad's in nutrition, and I don't think I would have done it any differently. I really liked having my undergraduate degree and then having, you know, my master's a little bit separate. But I think it's a great option for people who are, you know, kind of dead set on PA. And, you know, even I know some of the schools might be like more local to where you live. And so if you're only going to stay in that area, or, you know, the school really well, then it might be advantageous for you.
Yeah, I agree. All right. So this is a big one that, you know I get all the time is, do you ever feel limited as a PA? And I have answered this question a number of times on my, I have an IGTV and TikTok and all of that on this. And I think it's what you actually define limited as being. So I'm going to let you guys take this one because I can answer, but I've done that a lot. So why don't you go first, Joel? And what do you think?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so limited as a PA. Have I personally ever felt limited? No, but it is, again, as Michelle said, I know what I define that for me, and I kind of already knew going into the field of a PA that there would be some limitations. So as a PA who's worked in 2 different specialties, when I first graduated, I worked in family medicine, primary care. I can honestly tell you, my day did not look any different than the physicians. There was no limitations at all. It was the exact same. Now working in ophthalmology and I work in surgery, a limitation as a PA in an OR setting, I am not the main surgeon in the room and I will never be. So if you have that desire, you will feel limited. Do I feel limited? No, because I knew going into it that I wouldn't be the main surgeon and I was content with that. So I think this question depends on the setting that you're in. It's not so much the role of a PA, it's just the environment you're a PA in. And there are environments where you will feel at a ton of capacity and no one's restricting you at all and you work just the same like your colleagues. And in another setting, it might not be that way, but I don't have any like bitterness towards it. I honestly am so content with being a PA and I have no regrets. And I'm not just saying that to say that. So that's my answer there.
Nice.
Yeah, and I feel the exact same way. I, knew kind of what I was going into, and I think it depends on your team too. If you feel like you might feel limited, if there's more of that, authoritative, like kind of mantra, I guess, like throughout the team. But I'm really fortunate to work on a team where honestly, everyone from medical assistant to people who schedule our appointment up until, the lead of stem cell transplant, we all really appreciate everyone's opinion and it all gets taken into consideration. So I think it depends on the team. I also kind of, when I heard that question, like limited, I took it as more of in outside of practice. So outside of, clinical experience, the limitations, and I think honestly, the sky's the limit for PAs. We have other non-clinical opportunities like in research, and I'm getting my doctorate. I hope to teach one day, or be more involved in PA education. So, in the educational field and things like this, pre-PA mentoring. So I think there's a kind of limitless opportunities for non-clinical experiences too for PAs.
Yes, love that.
Yeah,
that.
I think that people really focus.
I've been faculty lecturer for PA programs ever since I've graduated. There's so many outlets. I have students all the time. Yeah, right. Wonderful. Good point, Emily.
Yeah, I think that people really get locked into like, oh, I'm going to be limited in my clinical practice. And there are just so many things that you could do as a PA that's not clinical practice. And so, teaching, management, I have a management position now. You could be in, advocacy, research, there's so many different areas that you can be involved in. So the answer I always say is no. And somebody asked too, like NP versus PA, how do I choose? First of all, I have 2 podcast episodes with and nurses who are nurse practitioners and then nurse to PA. And so you should definitely check those out on Beyond the Scope because it is a different profession. It's different training. The training is different for nurse practitioners than it is for a PA. They have an umbrella in which they need to sort of stay in sort of their specialty where we don't. And so you have to look at those, very specifically. And there are a lot of nurses that become PAs. So do not, sort of say, oh, I'm a nurse, I have to be a nurse practitioner. I talked to Crystal on the podcast and she was amazing. So, be sure to sort of check that out. Same goes for the question of like PA versus MD. Dude, it is just different. Like, and I'm married to one, and I actually reversed the question because I get asked all the time, like, why'd you choose to be a PA versus an MD? And I was like, well, Dave, why did you want to be a doctor? He's like, I just never even considered anything else. Like, he's like, I just never considered doing anything else. I just want to be the person in the room. Like, I want to be a surgeon. I want to do, so I feel like it's a lot of things that sort of go into those questions, and none of us can tell you what is right for you. You have to choose that on your own. And I think through shadowing, when we can do that, is a great way to sort of figure out, hey, is this going to be right for me or not? So, okay. So let's say, we'll do it like we have 10 more minutes. And so we answered, can you still teach? And then, okay, so GRE versus the PA CAT. Do we think the PA CAT is worth taking? There's not a lot of tips or study info.
Good question. So generally, most schools, if I was sitting in your shoes, I would take the GRE over the PCAT, and I just wouldn't apply to the schools that had the PCAT. There's a very few that require it. Most schools are either going to require no GRE or they'll require the GRE. You have a broader pool of schools to choose from if you do the GRE. Mm-hmm. That's just my take. Like, that would just be my way to narrow down the school. Unless that school is one you really want to go to, then take it. Other than that, I don't think it's worth your time.
Yeah, there's only like 7 programs that actually require it right now.
Yeah.
So I would say, kind of it's up to you. But if it's your dream school and they require it, go ahead. But otherwise.
Also, I've found that people push off the GRE until literally the last moment.
Yeah.
I really encourage you to take it earlier. So, now or February. Please don't wait until you want to apply, just in case you have to retake it or you want to take it. Give yourself enough time to do those things so that you can apply early. Just a little wisdom, I guess.
Yeah. And the GRE, like the point of the GRE, I think, is if you're someone who has a low GPA, you might want to consider taking the GRE, because if you can do well in it, that shows the school and that helps offsets it. So it's not just, don't view it as just it's to check the box to apply there. There is some strategy with it. If you have a low GPA, you might want to consider taking it. If you don't do well in them, you can be like someone like me. That was my way to trim the schools. I just didn't apply to schools that required it because I didn't want to take it. Right. And that's just another strategy way. So there are options, but if you are in that low GPA, you might want to consider taking it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we'll touch on personal statements real quickly. One of the questions I have here is, how can you stand out in a personal statement? Someone else in the chat asked, I'm not a good writer. How good does this have to be? Can it be overlooked by other things? What do you think?
I think the personal statement is probably one of the most important things of your application, if not the most, maybe besides your GPA or something like that. But I tell people who I do personal statement sessions with, by the time I submitted my application, in PA school, I had my personal statement right next to me as kind of like a motivator, because it was exactly what I wanted to say about how I got to this point and why I want to be a PA. And so I really encourage people to get to that point with their statements, because it is your one opportunity to really highlight why this field and why have you taken all these courses and all these things to get here. We're going to do this year a personal statement kind of like brainstorming session first. There's like a personal statement plus where you kind of get like a brainstorming session plus like the personal statement session that we normally do. And I think that will be helpful for people who, don't really know where to start. But Joel, what do you think?
Yeah, a question we got when we put it out on our Instagram was, someone wrote, what do I write about when I don't have, to quote them, extraordinary life experiences? They kind of feel like they didn't do anything grand and they feel dull. In that situation, it goes back to what Emily's saying. I know there maybe is a feeling of insecurity there, but you can't compare yourself to another applicant already. You have to write it about you. And I'm kind of along the lines of you don't need this dramatic introduction. You do want it to be positive and something to incite the reader, but I'm kind of nix the dramatic. I don't need to have this kind of elevated story to draw me in. I just want you. I literally just want you on a paper, and who are you? What qualities make you to become a PA? And then show us of through all those experiences, this is how you're going to be a great PA. Mm-hmm. So just, I can't tell you how many times when I start reading a personal statement and it starts out with someone else and not even then. And I'm like, you're already starting it. The essay's already written about someone else and not you. So just make sure it's about you guys.
Yeah. Oh my God. I say this all the time. It does not have to be a Netflix documentary.
Yes.
Okay. Like it doesn't have to be this like grand scene when you're like,
No.
in the middle of Africa on your, mission. I mean, it does not have to be like that. It doesn't have to be like an aha moment. Like, it doesn't have to be like that. I think the important thing to remember too is that not everybody's personal statement will get read. Okay. There is just no way that they can read so many personal statements. It's going to be the people that have made it through, the first or second screens. And then they're going to say, okay, this is a pretty good applicant. I want to know why. So it can really make or break your application. And so I really feel like it's important, but it's really important that you're talking about yourself. That is the biggest thing that people struggle with, but also the biggest problem I see in personal statements is that the statement is about somebody else. It's about their mom that died. It's about the patient they took care of. It's about, all that. And all of that is great and should be somehow included in there, but you have to be sure that you're highlighting yourself, your skills, why you want to do this in the first place, and really trying to think about it from the admission side. So if you're like, okay, what do I want to tell this person about me? And like when they read it, what do I want them to feel? And if you kind of do that, I think it's great. And Emily's right, like with the brainstorming session, if you're really struggling, that's a great way to sort of get started on that. So we have a couple of high school questions, and I really want to address them because there's, a high schooler here in the chat who's going to apply to, looks like a direct entry program. But I get questions from high schoolers a lot. What do I do in high school if I want to be a PA? If you know 100% that this is what you want to do and you're going to apply to a direct sort of entry program, then I think that what you should be doing is focusing on trying to get into the college as much as you're trying to get into the program. So what makes you a good college applicant, right? Having a good GPA, having extracurricular activities, showing some volunteer experience. If you have any leadership, like on student boards and government and all these things, all of those things look great for you. If you have the opportunity to get some patient care, that's wonderful. But I know that can be limited when you're that young, but I have had people do volunteer EMT as like a high school student and stuff like that. So I think those are some things I would think about doing. I wouldn't get too hung up on, oh, I need to be taking all these crazy science classes and things like that. And I think it really just depends on the college and the program that you're going to apply to. But, I feel like you also have to be so solid that this is what you want to do. And I think for me personally, I'm not going to lie, because it's just the way I am. There is no way I would have known this in high school, but that's just me. But some people, this profession has grown and it's so much more familiar now. I think people are just ready to sort of go right through, and that's amazing. But I have a hard time relating to that. Do you guys have any other, kind of words of wisdom for these young folks?
Yeah, I think, for me, I was, I knew I wanted to be a PA in high school. So I totally understand that. However, as Michelle alluded to, kind of that transition to college and kind of, sometimes questioning like, oh, should I be doing this or should I go into something else, was really important for me and kind of beneficial to get me to where I'm at today. So, for me, it wouldn't have been a good decision because I think also knowing that, I haven't been through that experience, but I anticipate it being different than, a normal kind of college 4-year, program. And so I think you have to go in with a mindset of like, that 4-year typical college, like kind of experience, I guess, if you want to say that. I hate using that term, but you might not have that. And if you're okay with that, okay, great. But for me, I went to a Big Ten school. And that's what I wanted. I wanted that. I wanted to learn nutrition and, kind of use that in my PA degree. And so that's just, I think it's some self-reflection and kind of knowing yourself and what you want.
I agree.
I think too, like one thing I don't want people to lose sight of is the PA career is in theory, like it's designed for people who have taken their moral imagination of medicine. In other words, if you're like me, you're sitting there in high school and you're trying to plan it out and you don't want to do medicine, but it's just imaginary because you've never done it. And it's moral. You want to help people. You want to do good things, but you've never actually done it. And so I struggled with committing my life to something before I actually did it, because we all know the reality of healthcare is a lot different than sometimes what we think it is. And the PA career is designed for us to take that moral imagination of medicine and actualize it, to show me what medicine is like and do it. And so when you go to PA school, I remember going into PA school and being faced really quickly with the rigorous and the arduous training it was. And I was so thankful that I had that experience to fall back on, that I did medicine, that I knew what I was getting myself into, and I would power through. My PA program was with a medical school, and there was medical students who went straight from undergrad to medical school and didn't work in healthcare. And I can't tell you how many times they were like, oh, this isn't what I thought. And then they felt stuck because they've committed their life to something. And so if you're sitting there as a high schooler, and it's maybe something you've just thought about doing, but you've never actually done it, I would really encourage you to expose yourself into medicine and just see some of the realities of it before you commit yourself to something. And I think the PA career is designed to do that. And that's, to me, a blessing of the PA career, that it asks you to do that. So it is self-reflection, and it's more of a personal choice.
Yeah, those are great words of wisdom. And sort of on that note, there's somebody else sort of asking in the chat about older applicants and do they struggle, more in a PA program? I think the answer is no. I mean, I was older when I went back to school. I was 25, and that's not that old, but at the same time, I transitioned from a working person back into an academic setting. And yes, it was hard at first. That transition was like, whoa, but I think that you just sort of find your groove, at some point. And so age should not be a reason for you to not apply to PA school, in my personal opinion. I think, just so you guys know, we work with students of all ages and types, and, try to guide you as best we can, through this process, and be as honest as possible. And, I think that this is something that you really have to want to do, and you want to have to be in medicine. And there's so many different factors that go into the application process. So hopefully we answered most of your questions here today. I think we did a pretty good job on our list, but it is 6 o'clock and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Somebody's giving a shout out to Emily for being a stem cell, whoop, whoop, a PA. And there was one question about ophthalmology, Joel, that I did not ask, and I should. Is it hard to find an ophthalmologist willing to train a PA? Last question.
We can answer this pretty shortly. Yes, very hard. It's impossible. So if you want to do ophthalmology as a PA, just message me on Instagram. I don't need to take everyone else's time because it's probably not a common thing. But the short answer is yes, very hard.
Awesome. And you guys know that we are all on Instagram. You can find us there. You can email, I have a link in my Instagram, and you can email me if you have questions. If you want to book an appointment, just go to michellenesky.com. Joel, Emily, and I all have availability, and we just love doing this. And it makes you just like, we totally geek out like when people get in. I mean, it's just amazing.
You should see our group chat, you guys.
I mean, it's just like geeking out top notch. So we really appreciate you being here. We hope that we can do, more free stuff like this for you in the future, just to answer your questions and get to know. So thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you, Emily and Joel. And hopefully everybody has tomorrow off. So any last words?
No, just thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Have a good night.